During a lesson last week, one of my learners told me that she wanted to take the driving test within the next 2 weeks because her theory expires in 2 weeks' time. And I declined. And as in many cases, the learner was persistent and said that she would love to go and try her luck. So in this video, I'll be sharing with you faults that she had made in a driving lesson today and why she is not ready for a driving test yet. And bear in mind that the clips you watch in this video were all taken from one driving lesson today, the 9th of April 2024. So let's rewind back and look at the first fault. Driving down this road, the speed limit is 20 and we're just about to enter a 30 miles per hour zone. And soon as the learner saw the sign, she started to increase speed and not planning for the bend right ahead. And as soon as she realizes that, she brakes suddenly and also without the use of her interior mirror before changing speed. Although the next clip is a little complicated, but this is why you should take your time and do proper observation at the junction. So this is Roslyn Way coming into Bontage Lane at Bramley Driving Test Center. The learner is to turn right at this junction and we have a bus in our lane at the bus stop. Now, deciding to turn right while the bus is still at the bus stop is not much of a problem as long as you are anticipating the bus and also increasing the time you're going to need for vehicles coming from your right hand side. This means that you're going to need a bigger gap between you and vehicles approaching from your right. But unfortunately, as the learner committed herself to move, she soon realized that the gap was not safe enough and is now trying to run past to overtake the bus. And while doing this, she failed to notice that the bus is now moving on as she tried to run away from the oncoming vehicle. So I had to steer her slightly away from the bus. And it must also be mentioned that this was a poor driving by this bus driver as he failed to check his blind spot before moving off. So remember, practice effective observations at junctions and do not put yourself in such a situation. Although you want to try as much as possible to avoid undue hesitation, but remember that in some situations, you'd rather get a minor fault than put yourself in a situation that's going to be more difficult for you to deal with and end up getting a serious fault. And in this third clip, the learner failed to respond correctly to the floor marking. Remember that you should not be driving against the floor marking. So approaching this roundabout, I instructed the learner to continue straight ahead for the second exit. And she used the left lane to cross the roundabout into the second exit. And in this case, on your test, that would be a serious fault. In this next clip, we had two serious faults on this same road, and both were for awareness and planning. In the first instance, the fault was actually not the learner's fault. It was a response to the situation that was the problem. So, as we approached this driver who had just turned into the road without effective observation, the learner's response was so late and only reached out for the brakes when I had already stopped the car. And just as we came off this situation, we then made the next situation ahead. So notice the bus stop on the left right here, because ahead of us is a bus that had just left that bus stop. And ahead of us is the bus on the pavement, halfway on and halfway off the pavement, as this bus waited to give clearance to another oncoming bus. And as the learner approached the situation, she was so sure of what she had in her mind while she tried to overtake the bus. And because of this, she never took a second thought of why the bus is actually on the pavement. But that is only if she actually knew that the bus was even on the pavement in the first place. So, I was curious to find out what was going through my learner's mind as she approached this situation. So I asked her to pull up on the left here so that we can reflect on the situation. And you would not believe the answer I got. So, to quote my learner, the reason she had decided to try and pass the bus was because the bus was offloading passengers. Despite the fact that there was no bus marking sign on the floor, there was no bus stop sign on any board, and there was no human beings in sight. So, my learner technically was now seeing ghosts. And though it might be funny, but this is the situation with many learners. This is what happens when you are constantly thinking in your mind. You start to see what your eyes does not see. You start to create situations around you. The reason why she had seen pedestrians in her mind was clearly because she saw a bus stopped at a position and not moving. And this is the final situation that tops it up as we approached this roundabout at Bromley. Now keep in mind we have the one-way sign and we also have the left directional sign pointing to the left. And so as we approached this roundabout, the instruction was to turn right, third exit. And shockingly, the learner attempted to turn right from the junction, going counterclock at the roundabout, despite the arrows pointing left. So, to wrap it up, keep in mind that what you have just watched are not the only faults that has been committed within this lesson. These were just the ones that I managed to save. So, this is a learner who is not so confident on the road, anxious about the test, and also confuses some situation on the road and unable to plan appropriately and on time in some situations, and yet willing to go and take the driving test just because a theory test is expiring in 2 weeks and is not willing to retake the test. Now remember that this exactly is the reason why DVSA has put the 10 working days gap before you reattempt any test, and also planning to increase this to 28 days in order to fish out learners who are trying to take the driving test while unprepared but based on luck, and also making sure that learners who have failed a driving test actually practice a bit more and work on their areas of weakness.